There are serious people who are taking this issue seriously, starting with the president himself, who, as you know, on his first domestic trip back in office, visited both North Carolina and California, both of which were, of course, hit by natural disasters when he wasn't even president, but he took ownership of that and visited those places and those people immediately.
Is it
Brian?
About hurricane season appropriate, though, now that this is serious business, as you talked about?
It's serious business, Kelly, and I'm not going to engage in such fodder with a question like that.
Well, bullshit Barbie once again using the White House podium to spew MAGA talking points and to spread disinformation. Let's be clear. What you just saw there was classic deflection on the part of Caroline Leavitt. Why? Because the reality and the truth and the facts are so bad for Donald Trump. She doesn't want to have to answer the question. So let's talk about what is going on with the freaking hurricane season and with FEMA. I take this very personally. I lost my home in 1992 to Hurricane Andrew, and so accurate, timely forecasting and storm prediction makes a difference literally between life and death. But what are we hearing right now? Well, one of my favorite people is John Morales. He's a local meteorologist for NBC6 here in Miami, and he went viral in the last day because of a column that he wrote, supported by a video that we're going to show you right now, wherein he expresses his sincere, professional, deep fear about why he cannot accurately predict the storm season for all of us because of what has happened at the hands of Donald Trump and Elon Musk and his DOGE tech bros. Take a listen.
And I am here to tell you that I am not sure I can do that this year because of the gutting, the sledgehammer attack on science in general, and I could talk about that for a long, long time, and how that is affecting the U.S. Leadership in science over many years, and how we're losing that leadership. And this is a multi-generational impact on science in this country, all right? But specifically, let's talk about the federal government cuts to the National Weather Service and to NOAA. Did you know that Central and South Florida National Weather Service offices are currently basically 20 to 40% understaffed? From Tampa to Key West, including the Miami office, 20 to 40% understaffed. Now, this type of staffing shortage is having impacts across the nation because there's been a nearly 20% reduction in weather balloon launches that carry those radiosondes. And what we're starting to see is that the quality of the forecasts is becoming degraded.
When I tell you that John Morales is a household name, he follows in a long line of meteorologists, including Brian Norcross. These are people whose sole job is to make sure that we are informed, but they're not the ones that are in the storm chasing planes. They're not the ones that are working at NOAA or at the National Weather Service. They're relying upon accurate data that is obtained to be able to give us this information. In the absence of that accurate data, they're left to have to give what they can. Right? They can't generate it. They can't make it up. That's a Trump specialty, to make shit up. But we do not want our meteorologists to do so. So you heard John. And in his column, he says, quote, "Am I worried? You bet I am. And so are hundreds of other scientists, including all living former U.S. National Weather Service directors who fear a needless loss of life as a result of the loss of staff and resources at the NWS brought on since January of 2025. NOAA is forecasting a 90% chance of an at or above average season. Central and Southern Florida's NWS offices are currently 19 to 39% understaffed, and across the country, less data is being collected by fewer weather balloon launches as a result of the staff shortages. So it's not just hurricanes, but I want to focus on that for a second, because again, selfishly, it has to do with kind of me and my immediate Florida folks. NOAA's hurricane hunter saw 2 flight directors and 1 electronic engineer terminated in late February 2025. If NOAA cannot fly as many reconnaissance missions, there's a real risk of hurricane specialists, quote, flying blind. One example that John Morales gave in his column is the following. In 2023, Hurricane Otis struck very near Acapulco, Mexico as a monster storm, 165 miles per hour, Category 5 cyclone. 24 hours before landfall, the National Hurricane Center predicted it would do so as only a 70-mile-per-hour tropical storm. Okay? John says a big reason the forecast was so badly botched was not having timely reconnaissance data because the hurricane hunters didn't reach Otis as it was developing. In 2025 in the Atlantic, there is a risk for fewer scheduled or downright canceled recon missions. In a nightmare scenario, this could lead to another Otis. Okay. Now, you couple that with kind of dovetailing what Caroline Leavitt was responding to when Kelly O'Donnell asked, well, is the president taking these things seriously? Because yes, we have already begun hurricane season, but consider what we learned from the New York Times. The acting head of FEMA, he didn't even realize that, that there's even a hurricane season to begin with. The acting head of FEMA told employees on Monday, just a few days ago, he didn't know the U.S. has a hurricane season. His name is David Richardson. Take a look. He's served in the Marines and he's worked in the Department of Homeland Security's Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction office. According to the Times, after Richardson joined FEMA in May, some FEMA workers expressed concern about his lack of experience in emergency management. Now, the Department of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem's baby, DHS oversees FEMA, if you guys didn't know that, and DHS said in a statement that Mr. Richardson was, quote, joking. Of course they're going to say that. Why? Because they got caught with their pants down. And because they're humiliated that the head of FEMA doesn't realize that, the hurricane season has already effing started. Hurricane season began Sunday last through November 30th, considered FEMA's most challenging period. Since the start of the Trump administration, FEMA has lost about a quarter of its full-time staff, including 1/5 of the coordinated officers who manage responses to large-scale disasters. Richardson's predecessor at FEMA, according to the Times, was a guy by the name of Cameron Hamilton. He was pushed out in early May, a day after he told members of Congress that FEMA was vital to communities in their greatest times of need and should not be eliminated. Why? Because Trump was saying that FEMA should be eliminated. So on his first full day as the acting administrator, Richardson tells FEMA's employees that if any of them tried to obstruct his agenda, quote, I will run right over you. What kind of wackadoo shit statement is that to give to your employees? He also said that he would give a new strategic plan for FEMA and it would be developed this summer. Again, this summer is an active hurricane season. So he's going to figure it out as he goes along. Again, a Trump administration specialty. The executive director of the National Emergency Management Association, Trina Sheets, which represents state emergency managers, says, quote, there's no plan in writing for how FEMA intends to respond during this disaster season. And like I said a few minutes ago, it's not just hurricanes, it's wildfires. Have we forgotten what happened in California and other states? And hurricanes are not just limited to Florida, it also includes North Carolina. But we know what happened to North Carolina. We'll get to that in a minute. I liked this part of the Times because I also asked myself, is there a historical comparison to a time when FEMA was so understaffed and underfunded? And according to the Times, no, there is no historical comparison because no other administration has ever made these type of deep cuts to FEMA or other disaster response agencies. Now, this is a very important part that I want to share with you. It says here that in the recent past, the nightmare scenario came in 2017. FEMA had to respond to 3 major devastating hurricanes in a row in quick succession. Hurricanes Harvey, Irma, and Maria, and as well to respond to the wildfires that were spreading in California. FEMA came close to running out of staff. So ready for the apples to oranges comparison we're going to have here? At the start of the 2017 hurricane season, FEMA had 6,588 trained staff members available to deploy to disasters. As of Wednesday of this week, FEMA only has 1,952. Folks, that's a big difference. I don't have to tell you that, but consider that. If the perfect storm, no pun intended, of FEMA disaster scenarios was 2017 and they started with 6,500 trained staff members to deploy, and now we're about to have one of the most active hurricane seasons that we've known, and you only have 1,900, we got a problem. So remember how we talked about North Carolina a minute ago? Well, let's talk about North Carolina and Arkansas. Why? Because the Trump administration has decided that it's not going to match the funds that North Carolina is using as a state to help for the recovery for the hurricane that slammed North Carolina last year. FEMA denied North Carolina's request for that agency to match 100% of the state funds for Hurricane Helene cleanup. Now, according to ABC News. So this cost sharing thing, it used to be different. It used to be lopsided. It used to be the state would carry the burden and maybe get a little bit of some fund matching from the federal government. But of course, thank you, Joe Biden. During the Biden administration, he changed it specifically to deal with Hurricane Helene. The Biden administration had a directive to match 100% of the funds that the state put in and to share the cost of that disaster cleanup after Hurricane Helene, which was a Cat 4, hit the state back in 2024. If you'll recall, tragically, over 230 people were killed by Hurricane Helene. Traditionally, this cost share model is 75% federal absorption of costs to 25% of the states. But again, the Biden administration said, no, we're going to help you. It's a natural disaster. You didn't ask for it and you need the help. So why not give it a match of $1 to $1 match? Now, where else did this also happen in the Trump administration? This initial denial of help? Well, that would be Arkansas. After tornadoes struck Arkansas in March of 2025, FEMA said, you know what? We're not going to help victims. So mind you, we're not even saying we're not helping the state right now. When people in Arkansas applied for help to FEMA, which is what you do when you're the victim of a natural disaster, and that is the mission of FEMA, FEMA denied the request to help victims to cover their housing, rental, and other expenses. Again, these are standard things that are supposed to be covered by FEMA. But what happened? Governor Huckabee Sanders, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, fashion challenged Huckabee Sanders, she went and asked for a favor of Donald Trump, and then her state got some help. That's not how it's supposed to work, people. It's not a quid pro quo. It's not a let me scratch your back, you scratch mine. It's not let me kiss your ass and you help my people. It is an obligation of the federal government to help its people. And it shouldn't be on a state-by-state basis in that regard. And it's not because people are trying to commit fraud. Trust me, I'm speaking from personal experience. We're not thinking about fraud when we don't have a roof, when we don't have running water, when we don't have basic supplies. That's not what you're thinking about. Yeah, to some people, sure. But you know what? You can't wholesale deny relief because you just want to be an asshole. So, sorry, went off a little bit there, right? So here's another scary thing for you to consider. It says an internal review of FEMA this month, May, indicated that FEMA is, quote, not ready for this hurricane season. As FEMA transforms to a smaller footprint, the intent for this hurricane season is not well understood, thus FEMA is not ready, citing staffing limitations, hiring, and a lack of coordination with states as the Trump administration attempts to reorganize and diminish FEMA. I invite you to, again, look into the articles that are out there because they're legion. But I just want to take a couple of minutes to talk about Andrew because it was a horrific experience. It was never supposed to hit us as hard as it did. It was supposed to veer north of us in southern Dade County. And it was August of 1992. And I was in my home with my mom and my dad and our two dogs at the time. And when I tell you everyone, including the dogs, had PTSD, that's not a joke. Literally, the roof was being peeled off my home. The windows were popped out from the air pressure. Water was crawling up the side of our walls from the storm surge. And I didn't even live on the water, guys. I lived miles west of the water. Huge boats ended up in the middle of streets. We had no electricity, no running water. The National Guard had to come in. It looked like a war zone. In fact, things that I relied upon in my neighborhood as I grew up as a child, little markers, maybe a sign here, a rock here, a tree here. When I grew up and I rode my bike in this neighborhood, those were all gone. You literally didn't know where you were. And just the basics were gone. And you had to rely on each other, but you were relying upon FEMA and you were relying upon the government, local and state and federal, and you were relying upon your insurer. And you know how I feel about the insurance companies. You're relying upon your insurer to help you. It is the most profound sense of helplessness when you don't even have a roof, when you don't even have food to be able to survive. So be mad, be outraged, demand accountability of this administration, because we're just starting hurricane season. And folks, it's called climate change. It's called climate change. And there's natural disasters that are going to come, and they're going to be worse, and they're going to be more of them. And we need our agencies like FEMA to be apolitical and to be well-funded and well-staffed so they can help us. See you on the other side. Katie Phang here. The truth matters now more than ever. So hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a thing. Thanks for watching.